Hi everyone, it's Ryan with SacramentoAppraisalBlog.com, and let's talk about the Sacramento market. Okay, I want to go through things here. It'll probably be 5 to 10 minutes or so, and I just want to give some points when we look at prices and inventory and sales volume and a few other things. And I hope this will be helpful and maybe give some talking points as you share with friends or talk with neighbors or make real estate decisions or talk with clients. So anyway, let's dive in. So right now the median price is down by about 1% so far this year. That's very normal. You see this seasonal element where values go up in the spring, they soften or they flatten out in the summer, and then they soften in the fall. Again, it's like clockwork every single year. And so if anything right now, we're going to expect to see a greater softening over the course of the next few months because normally the median price softens by about 5% or so before the year's up. Okay, so no matter how we look at it, we would expect to see price metrics soften right now over the next few months. You see the average price in green, median price in blue, and average price per square foot in red. So it took 30 days to sell last month. Depending on the price range, that could be different, and you can kind of see the trend of the higher the price, the longer it takes to sell. That's very normal. We see that happen all the time. Last year at the same time, it took 26 days to sell in Sacramento County, and so we see it took 4 days longer this year, which tells us that the market was softer this year. Keep in mind, 10 years ago, it's taking 90 days or more to sell, and so we have a much different market today, despite it being softer. Okay, in the region, it took 34 days to sell. In Placer County, 41. You can see this is interesting. So in red, you can see cash. Cash was 14% of all sales over the past quarter. And I think a lot of sellers think that cash is utterly dominating the market. They're pricing for these cash buyers, but let's look at the percentage of sales. That's really low, 14%. It's down from 36% in the county during 2013. And sellers would just be wise to price for this market today instead of the one from the past when it was really aggressive and when values were rising rapidly. We are not in that market anymore. Okay, at the same time, FHA sales are just about 18% of all sales over the past quarter. You can see FHA declining over time. And really, that's not so much because first-time buyers are getting squeezed out of the market. It's just because conventional financing is really a lot more competitive than FHA or even better. Okay, there's a lot of conventional products that don't have permanent mortgage insurance, so it just makes sense for buyers to utilize those. Okay, so but keep in mind, sellers, that as the market softens, you might have to give credits or concessions, and especially to buyers who are using loan programs where they might not be bringing a lot of money to the table. Know your market, okay? You might be having to offer some of these things, but realize that 18%, nearly 1 in 5, is still FHA. I mean, don't be afraid of FHA. These deals are absolutely getting done. 1% of all sales are bank owned and 1% are foreclosures, or excuse me, short sales. And so that's actually good news compared to, say, the first quarter of 2009 when we had 73% of sales were bank owned and about 11% were short sales. That is crazy. About 84% of the market was distressed. Here's a look at inventory. Right now we have a 2.4 month supply of homes for sale. Okay, and that's historically low when we consider where inventory's been, but it's definitely higher than it was over the past few years, particularly here when investors were gutting the market in 2012 and 2013. So I don't want to discount an increase in inventory because on one hand, the market is very sensitive to changes in inventory. We really feel it. Okay, it's not normal anymore to have a 5 month supply of homes for sale. That maybe that was normal in the past, not anymore. Okay, so the market's hypersensitive. But at the same time, we do have to realize that inventory still is historically low. And right now we're having a seasonal dynamic that's very similar to what we saw in 2014 during an extremely dull fall. And so let's just remember that as we see this uptick right now, and I'll explain why we're seeing this in just a sec. Here's inventory since 2001. You can see when the housing bubble burst, we had a 14-month supply of homes for sale. And right now we just see a much different story, thankfully. Inventory tends to increase during the fall. You can see the fall months in black. And so you see sort of inventory in the spring starts to increase, and then it sloughs off in December each year. Okay. Now, so right now we've seen a big change in inventory lately. That's not out of the ordinary, though. We would expect to see an increase in September. But let's look to 2014. Okay, here's 2014 where you see a inventory increase in September, October, November, and really where we saw we would expect to see a very similar dynamic in today's market. Okay, for a few years we've had a very sort of flat seasonal trend where, yeah, the market's felt softer, but it hasn't felt as dull as it did in 2014, especially where a lot of people thought that maybe the market was going to tank. And even 2015, I think the market felt a lot more dull. So if we only compare right now with the past couple years, I think we're going to be missing something important about how the market feels and how the market behaves in a season where there's more inventory. So why did we see this spike though? Is it because sellers are rushing the market? Are there so many more listings for sale? I actually say no, that's not what's happening here. Okay, the problem is with sales volume. Last month in Sacramento County, sales volume was down 14%. And in the region, volume was down 16%. And in Placer County, volume was down 19%. Okay, and so this is a big deal. And we have to pay attention to that, but we have to realize this sort of spike in inventory is something we're seeing on paper. It really has to do more with not so much sellers rushing the market, but properties that otherwise would have sold normally, but they're still on the market. Okay. Granted, all year long we sort of bottomed out in inventory, and we have seen more inventory all year, so that's part of it. But I think the bigger part is having a softer sales volume trend over the past 3 months, and we're seeing that show up with what inventory looks like. So a couple points that the market over the past few years has found a rhythm in volume. Okay, and so we've seen this real normalcy to sales volume, and so I think that's why we're kind of calling into question, well, what's happening right now? Is this off rhythm? Well, maybe, but here's something more deep. There's a lot of numbers here, so just stick with me. Over the past 12 months, you can see here's sales volume in 2018 compared to 2017, 16, and so on. You could see that sales volume has actually been really strong over the past 12 months. A very similar dynamic when we're looking at sales volume in all of 2018. Okay, so sales volume has been strong, but we see that September was very weak. Okay, now it also been down just a little bit in the summer, but not like a 14% down. This was actually the lowest September since 2007. And so I think that on one hand, we have to pay attention to this trend, because when a market really begins to change, we start to see a difference first in the listings and then in the sales. And if sales volume is starting to change, that could be a sign of something. But at the same time, I think we would be foolish if we weren't looking at the overall trend that volume has actually been very strong so far this year. Okay, to be fair, one of the problems could be that buyers rushed the market during the first part of the year. Okay, and then buyers were so desperate because interest rates were going to rise. Okay, and then they had their running shoes on, they ran towards the market, but right now they took off their running shoes. And so if we see this number sort of slough off because buyers become less interested in the market, well, that could be an issue. That could be a sign that things are really changing. Or if we see this number slough off, but maybe the next couple months are somewhat normal, then we just chalk it up to say, well, we had a season there where buyers were adjusting to a new dynamic in the market. Where are interest rates at right now? Okay, and so I think we need a few more months of data to really explain what's going on here. We need to keep listening to sellers, keep listening to buyers, keep listening to what the real estate community is saying, and be careful of sensational headlines too, probably. Here's sales volume in the region though, and you see a very similar dynamic where volume has been strong for the past 12 months, strong all year, maybe down just slightly, but kind of a dismal September. I mean, compared to previous years, volume was really low. Here's the quarter three in Sacramento County, you can see that this quarter in 2018 was lower than the previous quarters. Kind of an interesting trend we've seen since 2009, where sort of up and down, up and down. And so again, this could be sort of, the new seasonal reality, but definitely when we look at the past quarter, this year was down 6% compared to the year before. Okay, and in the region, quarterly volume was down 8%. And so just something we have to watch. Some quick tips, I'd say talk to sellers about pricing according to listings that are actually getting it into contract instead of the highest prices from the spring. Okay, this is so important because we don't see the current market in the highest sales from the past. We have to look to the present. So what is actually getting into contract? That's where we're going to see our market. And I'd say remember 2014 because that was our most recent very dull market where stats are so far starting to show a similarity. We just simply have to realize that listings often are in a market like that are going to need more significant price changes compared to the spring. Okay, in some markets you might look to the spring and go, yeah, this season is dull in the fall, and maybe you just price 1 to 2% lower. But when a market gets very dull, we might have to price much more significantly lower. Okay, there's no magic number I can give you right now because it's going to be different in every neighborhood and price range, but you have to look to the neighborhood for that answer. And sellers, be really careful about other listings that aren't selling. It's so tempting to want to price according to those listings, but if they're not selling, that means they're not in the market. They're on the market, okay? That was a Jay Papasan saying. And so, anyway, thirdly, study the market so you can spot if changes are normal or not. Okay, this is sort of what we're in the middle of right now, and we have to live in the tension of not knowing exactly, okay, what does it mean that sales volume is changing? Is that symptomatic of a fall season that's going to be very dull? Or is it symptomatic of the market really changing momentum and starting to go a different direction? And frankly, we just need a little bit more time to figure that out. One key point is that even when the market was declining in 2005, we saw a seasonal uptick in 2006. And so if the market does start to change right now, what we see happen in early 2019 could actually mask whatever slowness we're seeing right now because you could think, wow, yeah, more eyeballs are on real estate and pendings are up. It's taking less time to sell. Prices are up. All the normal things that we see happen in a spring season. Okay, so I would expect to see that in the spring. And so in some senses, I say we need a few months of data, but we might even need even more time. Okay, let's see what happens with listings and volume though. Lastly, be careful not to regurgitate sensational headlines. This is so important. There are a lot of those out there. They typically show up during the fall. We've seen that for the past 5 years during the fall, but right now, I think on the national level and even local level, we're starting to tap into this dynamic of, hey, this could be an issue about lower volume. And I mean, I think that's honest. It's fair, but still we have to maybe pull back and just be patient and live in the tension of what the market's doing right now. So I have a blog at sacramentoappraisalblog.com. You can check it out if you want, subscribe if you wish. I hope this was helpful. I know that's longer, but hey, if you got some value, give it a like and comment below. Thanks so much.